Secrets, secrets, they're dangerous fun. Blow up your castles, prepare your speeches, and watch out for that pipe, because this episode doesn't exist at all. Welcome to Channel 8.5. Hello and thank you for joining us at Channel 8.5, a show all about movies and TV and pop culture. My name is Joe Galena.
And I'm Andrew Hanna.
Andrew, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Joe. This week's a Watchlist episode where we discuss what we've been watching lately. On today's Watchlist, we'll be talking about Amazon's Utopia, Jon Stewart's Irresistible, and Netflix's Enola Holmes.
And we're going to start with Utopia because this is one that you and I both are quite passionate about. And I don't know how many other people are. Because do you know a lot of people who've seen Utopia? I should preface this by saying it is a remake of a British show, a cult British show, that came out in 2013, 2014. There were 2 seasons of it. But it doesn't seem like a lot of people know what this is. And it doesn't seem like a lot of people know what the new Amazon Prime one is either.
I know very few people, if not any, actually, that have seen Utopia. I recommended it to maybe 1 or 2 friends who watched part of it because they're hard to find. I mean, even I was looking for the original Utopia and I was willing to just buy it, whether it's on Blu-ray or even just the digital versions, and I can't find it anywhere.
It is strange. It's a show by Channel 4, which is one of the networks in Britain, you know, like BBC or like our NBC, ABC, CBS. Channel 4 usually doesn't care. Channel 4 will just give away their stuff on YouTube. They don't really claim things. I don't know why.
Well, they're a public service channel, too. They're like PBS, basically.
Kind of. BBC will claim stuff on YouTube, though, and so will Sky. Sky's another network over there. Sky will come down at you. They'll come through the walls to take away their...
Far more international than Channel 4.
Utopia, for some reason, though, it is more difficult to find. You can find it on YouTube, but really not on any other streaming service.
Yeah, I found the first episode on YouTube, and then the rest of them, I remember watching them on Daily Motion, and that's where I usually watch something that I can't find anywhere. I'm more than willing to pay the money. It's just if I can't, then I'll find a way to watch it, and this is one of those shows. But yeah, that's the thing is a lot of our criticism, because I assume that, like me, you did not like the American version.
Correct.
A lot of our criticism will not resonate with people because they don't know the original. But if you are able to find them, and I'll try to link them in the description on our YouTube video, definitely check it out. It is one of the best television shows I think I've ever seen.
It's one of my favorite shows ever. In all honesty, there's no hyperbole there. I love Utopia, the original, so much.
And it was different for its time. When you think about 2013, you weren't getting a lot of dark, gritty...
conspiracy thrillers.
Especially out of Britain. I mean, most of the things that were coming out of Britain, like you reference a lot, are the small town murder mystery type
your
shows.
Midsummer Murders and your Doc Browns.
Yeah, this was far more stylized than anything I'd ever seen.
I'll set up what it's about. It follows a group of strangers, so 5 people who are in search of a manuscript of a cult comic book / graphic novel called Utopia, because there's supposed to be hidden secrets inside of this book. That's what it is. And it's them, the beginning of the first episode, they all are kind of in this forum, you know, chat room type environment saying Utopia has been found. Utopia has been found.
The second version of Utopia, yeah.
The second version, exactly. Like a second addendum, a sequel.
Yeah.
To the original has been found. It's a very big deal. They're all meeting up for the first time to discuss this because they're all kind of obsessed with this, finding this graphic novel. And then there's also a mysterious organization that is hunting them down. And there's 2 hired contract killers who we see the very first episode. Very first scene.
Yeah.
The opening scene of the UK version shows them trying to track down the comic book because they've also heard that it's out there now. It's been found. And it's a striking first scene, incredible, of these 2 hired guns. Even though they don't use guns, they use a gas mask to kill the people in a comic book shop.
And pipes.
And pipes. And it's so incredible. And it follows these couple storylines. Also, there's another character who works for like a CDC type of organization, Britain's version of that, and also a government official. And it all kind of coalesces over the course of the season. And I cannot explain the tone or the eeriness of even that first scene well enough without seeing it. You have to see it to understand.
And it's unsettling in a way that sets up, 1, the mood and the themes, 2, the stakes of the graphic novel, because the American version doesn't do that. The American version, you don't really
No.
understand the stakes until about halfway through the pilot episode, whereas the UK version immediately sets up the transcript of this comic as something worth murdering over. So the stakes are already set right off the rip.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately.
And no one escapes this, whether it's the adults that work in the comic book shop or even the child that was hiding under one of the racks. I mean, it was just very brutal.
But also so colorful. It's such a colorful show as well. It's a weird mix of ultra violence, but also very saturated colors, very stylized colors. Again, it's something that is kind of inexplainable to somebody without seeing it.
And that's the most glaring shortfall, I think, in the American version is the direction, the production design, where the original was highly stylized and almost neon acidic colors
Mhm.
that fit the theme very well of just this dreadful world that's hiding behind this facade of bright saturated colors, and the music was unsettling. I mean, the music was phenomenal. It's one of the best soundtracks for a show, and the performances were believable and mature in contrast to its American counterpart. I mean, the American version, from what I saw, and I only saw the pilot, it almost felt like a YA adaptation of the original.
That's exactly what it felt like. It felt generic, and it did feel like a YA adaptation of it.
I wasn't surprised by how disappointed I was, from the stories to the characters to the production design and directing. Like I said, it's just the thing that frustrated me the most was how much they dumbed it down, presumably for American audiences, and that frustrates me to no end.
I don't know about that. I don't know if they dumbed it down for American audiences or if they were just not smart in adapting it. I don't know if it was dumbed down just because, not just for
Well,
America, but just by the nature of what it is. Because this show had a very troubled production. They've been trying to make this adaptation for a lot of years now, probably even since about 2015. David Fincher was
mhm,
gonna make it at HBO for a while. Rooney
yeah.
Mara was gonna be in it, and then
Who
it
would
kind
have
of
been perfect as Jessica Hyde. I mean, when I saw the character in the British version, because I rewatched it right after, I was like, okay, I need to know if my frustration is validated, if it was as great as I remembered it being, which it was. But I came out of that thinking, why didn't they get David Fincher to do this? Little that I know, and after looking into it, and I think I remember actually hearing that David Fincher was planning on doing it for HBO.
Mhm.
Maybe subconsciously that stuck. But 1, HBO would have been perfect to adapt this because they just do television well and have a consistent history with this type of content. 2, David Fincher is a master in that space. The tone just fit his style so perfectly. And he was kind of the obvious choice, which obviously I wasn't the only person who thought that.
The adaptation, there's not a lot to say about the plot because they do keep most of the plot the same. Amazon has released all 8 of the episodes for it. I know
Yeah.
you just watched the pilot. I actually watched all of them. I did that on Saturday. I don't know how I did it because, again, it's disappointing. They change a little bit of the characters in it. For example, Rainn Wilson and John Cusack are in the American remake, but they're
Yeah.
not in the first episode at all.
Which was interesting that they didn't introduce John Cusack's character until the second episode. So I think I remember I watched half of the second episode.
Oh, okay, okay.
Now that I think about it, because I saw the whole artificial meat company and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So after watching the first episode of Utopia, the other thing that I think what made it feel a little bit more dumbed down is they're trying to stretch it out. And that's very apparent because in the first episode, not a lot happens, at least in comparison to the original. So the original, you can probably consolidate the first 2 episodes of the American version into that first episode of the UK version.
Mhm.
And so it felt as though they were trying to stretch it out because they're planning on this being kind of ongoing for a while.
It feels that way,
Yeah.
especially once you get to the end. You're gonna see that a lot. The adaptational choice too, see, a lot of just the choices, it felt like it tried to make it very generic or very accessible. It felt like the Amazon version, it was afraid. It was afraid
Yeah.
of the
Mhm.
tone of the original. It was afraid of making the characters sort of fringe characters, even on something that is a fringe idea or a fringe conspiracy. Utopia was even meant to be one of those things that those people are like, well, that's kind of weird though. Like, that's not real.
But that's not what audiences want. I mean, Channel 4 is the ones who made Black Mirror, right? It wasn't BBC, it was Channel 4. And so I feel as though this set the stage for Black Mirror because Black Mirror is of the same tradition in a sense of that dark kind of conspiratorial
Mhm.
stories and things like that.
Just messed up stuff.
Yeah, people were drawn to it. It appealed to a broad audience. So again, there is a disparity between what studios think people want and what people actually want. And the thing that frustrates me is that Amazon doesn't have to worry about ad revenue. And so why hold back? Why not go full force? Like you said, I think I completely agree, is that it felt as though they were afraid of the content, the subject matter. I mean, which is understandable, right? The world is different than it was in 2013. Conspiracy theories are far more widely accepted these days, and especially with the premise of viruses and things
S
like that.
Well, that was an accident, though. They shot this back in
Well, yeah.
2019. The fact that it deals with a flu in the that's infecting the world just so happens to coincide with coronavirus now, that's just a happy coincidence that is actually quite morbid and horrifying.
Well, sure, a coincidence with this specific pandemic. However, between SARS, MERS, H1N1, Ebola, etc., COVID just happens to be the most devastating, but the pattern of viral outbreaks has become the unfortunate norm and has progressed since 2013. So it's changed in that way. But just in the last 4 years, we're at this boiling point. So I can understand why they may have withheld a bit, but overall, it felt very watered down, especially the characters.
They didn't feel desperate enough to me. So the people in the original Utopia show, they felt sort of desperate, they felt alone, they felt like this was a thing that they cling to. In the Amazon version, they go to a thing called Fringe Con, where they're
Hmm.
having a Comic-Con type party for fringe stuff, which I did enjoy the first episode, the guy wearing the bunny rabbit ears,
Yeah.
because if you haven't seen it, the comic book Utopia follows a character called Mr. Rabbit. He's the main character, and so there's a plethora of rabbit imagery in the show. I enjoyed his rabbit head, but really that's about it. And so much, even that once the killers start killing people, they just start knocking on doors and blowing people's heads off. You couldn't get away with that. That's too loud,
Yeah,
and there's cameras everywhere. In the original
exactly.
version, they're very
Clean, they're very careful and precise in the way that
mhm.
they go about it. No, I was thinking that as well, is that it doesn't feel believable, and what made the original so effective is that it evoked this visceral paranoia in you as a viewer because everything they presented was plausible. And when you have your supposed expert killers going about it in the way that they did, you think, well, that wouldn't work at all, or that's sloppy, and you're pulled out as a viewer, and it dilutes the conflict. Even the psychopath guy was not believable in the least bit. His performance was terrible.
You mean Arby?
The one that eats the raisins,
Yes, the one who eats the raisins. Mhm.
he looked like an actor playing a psychopath. It felt so contrived.
It's funny because they try to mix up the casting. A lot of the
Mhm.
characters in the new one and the old one don't really match up. The Becky character, for example, um, is a black woman in the
Yeah.
Amazon one, whereas Ian is black in the UK one. I don't know why if they did that intentionally. I didn't really read anything into that other than they wanted to change things just to change things. I don't know. But
Yeah.
anyway, the character of Arby, the psychopathic killer, looks very similar to Neil Maskell, who played him in the UK version. So that was clearly a very intentional choice.
Then the yellow bag and all of that. It was
They do
almost
bring back the
like
yellow bag. The yellow
yeah,
bag is, if you've seen an image of Utopia, you've seen that yellow bag.
it's
That yellow
iconic,
bag
yeah.
is
With that
iconic.
show at least, I mean.
Exactly.
Even his partner's role in the British version was a little bit more pronounced, whereas in this he's watered down and his best traits were just given to Arby.
His partner in the UK version wears a very bright neon suit and it sticks out and it's very memorable. This
It's like
one,
a
he just
royal blue with, like, white
exactly.
loafers, and
And
so it's a very distinct uniform in a sense.
very. And then in season 2, they give him, I think, a green one. It's either green or yellow. I'm not great at colors, but
Yeah.
in this one, he's just a kind of a generic. You know what it felt like it was trying to be? It felt like it was trying to be Pulp Fiction, and it wasn't.
In a way, yeah.
A
Yeah.
little bit with the music and the stylization and the we're going to be cool violence sort of a thing.
Well, yeah, and we're gonna kill people in different ways and inject them, and like the gas when they walk into the house. I mean, it was so much, and it was so. The only part that I did like though was when he walked into Wilson's father's place, and he says, "I've done my research," and he says,
Yeah.
"You know too much," and then he kills him, and he says, "Why did you tell him that?" And he's like, "I mean, think about all the work he put into this. At least let him die happy."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, that's actually really funny." I did
That's fair.
appreciate that moment. And I didn't mind the whole Comic-Con or FringeCon thing. I think that
Oh,
that
that
fits
bothered me
with
a lot.
American culture. I didn't like it.
I guess it fits.
I didn't like the decision, but I understand, okay, they wanted to make it more relatable. Not many people these days are on quote unquote message boards. It's not the early 2000s. I mean,
Yeah,
it could
it's
have been
not.
Reddit for God's sake.
It
I
could have
mean,
been
they
a
could
Reddit.
have,
It's not
yeah,
2010 anymore. I don't know when Utopia was shot. Probably around 2011 because it came out in
yeah.
2013.
The main characters, the group of misfits, are all basically playing the same character. No one is distinct.
No.
The performances weren't great. They were over the top and cheesy. The only performance that I liked was Becky's because I thought she was probably the most natural. Ian's character, he's actually from Easy A.
Dan Bird. Yeah.
Yeah. He plays that character well, but even then he was somewhat obnoxious.
He was kind of whiny.
Yeah, and he was just like, "Yeah,
To
this
be
is
fair
all
though,
stupid," and
Ian in the original is also kind of whiny.
no, but Ian, I think, is the most relatable in the original, where he's kind of our introduction to the world.
Very much.
Because is it Samantha or Becky, the main girl?
Becky is the main girl in the UK version. Sam is a American version creation, so she was not
That's
in the
right.
original.
She plays that character in a
Hmm.
way. Well, now that I think about it, they added someone.
They added her, the blonde girl.
Yeah, yeah.
What did you think of Desmond Borges as Wilson Wilson? Because I like him as an actor. He's really good in the show You're the Worst, and I liked him.
He's a good actor, but I think they watered even Wilson down. He wasn't as
That's the
careful
no.
as Wilson was in the original. He was almost a little bit too similar to the rest of the characters. I mean, the original Wilson would have lost his mind if
Exactly.
someone texted his address a stranger. I mean,
Yeah.
and then also even the kid. I mean, the kid in the UK version was kind of a little shit. You only empathize with him because he is a kid, but you understand because he's coming from a really kind of messed up childhood.
Yeah.
And they sort of showed it in this adaptation, but he's far dumber than the UK version because when he goes into the penthouse suite, he's jumping around and doing stupid things. And it's like, no, this kid is supposed to be smart enough to figure out the things in the Utopia graphic novel, smart enough to understand that this is going to have an effect on the world and his life and things like that. It was far less interesting, far less dark. Again, YA adaptation. It was watered down.
What did you think of Jessica Hyde's performance in the new version?
I only watched the end. I did not like her character. She was hard to look at.
I'm trying to remember now in my head because I watched them all back to back to back to back to back to back. Does Jessica Hyde only show up at the very end of episode 1,
No,
or is
she
she in
shows
it a
up
little bit?
about maybe 3/4 in when she
That's what I thought.
adds, yeah, to see like the cameras and things like that. She's hard to look at. I don't think it has anything to do with the actress. I mean, they did her up to be hard to look at, but
No, I think it was the direction they took the character because I think Jessica Hyde is a perfect example of why this was done incorrectly because I think she plays it, not the actress, but the way that they
yeah,
wrote the character with too much menace. And maybe that's unfair to say, but the original portrayal of Jessica Hyde was done with such nonchalance that it made her more menacing while also having this strange, and it's not an innocence, but almost like a childlike nature to her because she's just been on the run. She has this sort of arrested development, stunted growth that the
hmm
way she dresses, the way her voice is, it's very childlike. But
yeah,
then she also kills people and she even gives orders. Like she talks the way kids talk in that, when you're a child, you just
yeah,
kind of give
yeah.
orders and
The
you're just like,
bossy kid.
yeah, she's like a
Yeah,
bossy kid and she just expects that when she talks, people are going to give her what she wants.
yeah,
And that's how kids are, right? They go, oh,
yeah.
I want the milk. And then when mom goes, no, you can't have that. And they go, oh, but yes, I want it though.
Well, yeah, it went from being a complex character that was both vulnerable and, like you said, menacing all at the
Hmm.
same time because she is not a damsel in distress, but she is being hunted, but is also in control of the situation and is able
Always.
to guide everyone through it. And if anything, she's at times, from what I remember from the UK version, she's manipulating them in specific situations.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
she's not giving them the full truth and is sort of, letting them kind of do her bidding to help her get what she wants and what she needs. The stakes were so much more understated in the new one. I mean, the first episode, the main characters all get arrested for child pornography and child sexual assault, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, when you think about
Heavy.
that, that is, yeah, it's heavy and it's scary. Like, oh my God, especially Ian's character and his kind of experience with that. And he's only let off when his brother is like, we were at a wedding during the time in which you're saying this crime took place, and you feel the overshadowing presence of this larger organization. The scene with the CDC guy when they're sitting in the office and he says it's your mission, and down to the dialogue with Arby and the other skinny dude. Arby isn't asking where's Jessica Hyde the entire time until the end of the first episode, and the whole time you're thinking, okay, he doesn't know what he's asking. You don't really understand that there's meaning behind the question, and so they take that question
Mhm.
completely out.
Did you get to the point where you met Rainn Wilson in episode 2?
No, no,
Okay, so
not
you haven't
yet.
seen any of him yet. I
Yeah.
was interested when they introduced Rainn Wilson's character because Rainn Wilson's office is in the University of Illinois, Chicago, where I went to school. His office is in the Behavioral Sciences building. It's called BSB, and I immediately knew it. And I was like, "Oh, hello. I know that building." So the stupidest thing about that building is that it was designed to mimic a human brain. And if you think that's a dumb way to make a building, you're right.
What
Because
way?
so it's all a big circle. And if you actually see one of the shots that Rainn Wilson, he walks through the building and it's a circle like an auditorium
Yeah.
or an atrium. And hallways will just like branch off the center of this for what I can see is no reason. So if you'll be looking for like room 245, you'll go off into a direction that it's like, oh, 240, so it must be over this way. And then the hallway just stops. And then it's like 244 and then nothing. And then
Is
240
architecture not meant to be built for efficiency?
that's what we all said. And so 245 is on the other side of the building. And you're like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Who builds a building like this? This is like a damn saw puzzle.
The worst job in that
Ugh.
building is likely the information desk that has to constantly give directions.
There is no information desk. You just show up. It's so ridiculous.
God.
You're just wandering around this building. Honest to God, you wander around and you have no clue how you got to anywhere. I knew how to get to the rooms that I knew how to get to and nowhere else. If you asked me how to get anywhere else, I wouldn't have any
That's
idea.
so weird.
It was the most ridiculous thing. And apparently the BSB is on the Chicago architecture tour. I guess it's a very famous, fancy, look at this fancy building that UIC has. But you don't have to go inside of it.
It's a pain.
UIC has weird architectural choices. They have some buildings that were built in the 70s and they look like Soviet communist prisons on the
Ugh.
outside. They look disgusting. They're the worst looking buildings ever.
That's so weird.
UIC is a weird place, but I recognized a lot of the buildings.
I am interested, though, to see where John Cusack's role plays into this, because I like the concept of them including the Beyond Meat element, which is very relevant these days.
There is an interesting storyline with John Cusack and the guy who plays his son, who is played by Corey Michael Smith. He plays Thomas Christie. John Cusack plays Dr. Christie, the head of this company. Their relationship is really good, and Corey Michael Smith brings an energy to it that no one else really has, and he kind of becomes a secondary villain, because I don't think
it is right in the first scene.
It's not a spoiler to say that John Cusack's character as this CEO of this giant company is being set up to be the antagonist, I guess, for lack of a better word, even though he's also kind of brought into it as well.
Only because I know the original, and that usually corporations and organizations are kind of the antagonists in this.
Yeah, they don't really have a government shadowy organization in this one. It's more big pharma that is the antagonist,
which maybe is a little bit more relevant to today's world. I think the veil has been lifted on the true source of conflict and evil in our politics and our government has really kind of come down to big corporations and monopolies and things like that, which again is interesting that Amazon is dipping their toe into this water again.
I think it is telling that Amazon released all of this on one day, because you notice with The Boys, they're releasing the first 3 and then it's week by week. And The Boys is, we talked about it a few weeks ago, phenomenal. Season 2, just as good as season 1. And I think Amazon knows that. I think Amazon knows that they kind of have one that people aren't going to care about with Utopia. And they just go, let's just release it all. We don't need to worry about it. Nobody's tuning in on Fridays for Utopia anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I think they've almost admitted through their actions that it's not that good, or they don't want to stand behind it.
They realize that they haven't created a compelling enough story to keep people. Like, the first episode really sold you right off the bat. Even in the first scene, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And it prompted me to work as hard as I did to look for every single episode to watch, Whereas this, even though it's available to me easily, I have no reason to come back and watch it. So it almost feels as though, especially in the fact that they've kind of stretched it out, and it seems as though they're stretching out the story because they only had 2 seasons of the original to go off of, and they're going to need a little bit more time to continue to develop, because it doesn't, I assume you've seen the entire season.
Mhm.
Did it end the same way that the first season ended, or does it seem as though they're splitting the first season of the original into 2 seasons?
No, it ended the same way. So the points did converge in that way, but it was a little bit different just because they took out the government aspect of the original. So
Yeah.
it did have to divert a little bit from that, but it was basically the same. I will
Okay.
say that season 2 of Utopia, the original, isn't as good. I didn't
I
enjoy it
heard
as
it
much as
wasn't as
season 1.
great.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it as much as season 1. And it deals with the same conspiracy. I don't know if I should say what it is because you and I know what it is, but for people who don't,
Yeah,
I don't wanna
don't say.
I don't
Yeah.
wanna give away the game, but it does deal with the exact same plot, but just done
Yeah.
in a different way.
I really wish that this was better than it actually was. It was written by Gillian Flynn,
Gillian Flynn
Gone Girl.
of Gone Girl and Sharp Objects fame,
Yeah.
and Widows. Did you see the movie Widows?
No.
It was a heist movie. It came out a couple of years ago. It was quite good. It was about these wives of these bank robbers who get thrown in jail, and so they then have to go and rob the banks that the husbands were going
Oh,
to
that's
rob.
interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good. I liked it a lot, but she wrote the screenplay for that too, but this one was a swing and a miss.
Yeah. If you're gonna be watching one or the other, either the American Utopia or the British Utopia, don't bother with the American, watch the original, and if you want more, watch the American because they'll likely stretch it out a little bit longer.
And you'll learn very quickly that if someone says, "Hey, take a hit off this gas mask," don't do it because you're probably going to either die or get bashed in the head with a pipe.
Exactly. But moving on, we are going to talk about Irresistible, Jon Stewart's film that came out earlier this year.
You mentioned politics a little bit earlier, and this is kind of an unintentional thing that happened this week. This is going to be a political episode.
It is. It is.
We didn't even mean for this to happen.
We are coming to the end of the election, so maybe it is fitting. But yes, this is going to be a very political episode because even Enola Holmes is somewhat political. Not
Yeah, it
somewhat,
is.
it's actually very political.
Oh, it's very
but
political. We'll get to
yeah.
that later. From the weird, jaunty younger sister of Sherlock Holmes turned into a political thing. Anyway, we'll get to it. About Irresistible.
Irresistible is Jon Stewart's second film that he's made. He made Rosewater, which was about an Iranian journalist. Irresistible is about Steve Carell, who plays a Democratic strategist who helps a retired veteran run for mayor in a small conservative Midwest town. And Rose Byrne plays his counterpart on the conservative side.
Mhm.
She's the Republican strategist in a sense, and they have this sort of rivalry.
It's one of those big time hot shot DC / New York / LA / whatever big time hot shot big city guy goes to a small town and learns some stuff. Oh boy.
I thought it was going to be that, and it really wasn't.
I thought it was
Which
going to be that
so
too.
interesting.
And by the end, it was not that, and I liked that.
Yeah.
But
And
what did you think of this overall though? Because this is something that wasn't even on my radar. You suggested this one for this week's episode. I didn't know anything about it.
I'll preface this with, we've spoken about our aversion to preachiness and quote unquote messages in film and television
And
in the past.
boy, was this preachy.
It was, but I believe context matters because it was preachy, yes, and it's to be expected in a political film. However, in my opinion, it wasn't as revolting in the way that the newsroom at times could be.
It's so funny because I immediately thought of The West Wing when
Or,
watching
yeah,
this.
anything
not
Aaron
as-
Sorkin has made.
But a not as good version of The West Wing. I didn't care for this as much, to be fair.
It's not, the best thing ever out there, and I don't think it was trying to be. I think this was honestly more of just a personal essay from Jon Stewart, which is sort of how he conducts himself or how he kind of goes about things. Because I think a lot of the preachiness has to do with the creators. So Jon Stewart with Irresistible and then Aaron Sorkin with The Newsroom. And Aaron Sorkin is someone that you can easily consider a bleeding heart liberal. And The Newsroom reflects that because it's seemingly a love letter to MSNBC, basically.
You're not kidding.
Whereas Jon
It's also
Stewart,
a love letter to women falling down and being klutzes, which is a really weird backwards thing that Aaron Sorkin likes to do. He
I
loves
don't-
having
yeah.
women fall over and do pratfalls. It's strange.
I believe that Aaron Sorkin, for as talented of a writer as he is, he does not write women well.
Oh, no.
They're always these like manic, kind of disheveled, talking really fast and don't notice the other character who's kind of this stoic, calm, present man. And it's frustrating at
Yeah,
times.
you
But
need somebody like Allison Janney in The West Wing who plays CJ Craig to rein that in or to kind of overcome that, because in the
yeah,
pilot of The West Wing, her opening scene is she's running on a treadmill talking to a dude and then falls over.
yeah.
And it's Allison Janney, and Allison Janney's amazing, but ooh, all right.
I think what drew me to this is what's always drawn me to Jon Stewart, because though he leans left, he views our political system through a sober, unbiased lens.
Mhm.
And that's always resonated with me, especially at a young age. And I've mentioned before when we were talking about Rami, as an Egyptian growing up in the US, I constantly grappled with my identity as an American Egyptian. And when it came to politics, my parents were extremely liberal by Egyptian standards, however, conservative by American standards. So when I was starting to get interested in politics, Jon Stewart was the first voice that really resonated with me, because he recognizes that those who identify as conservative have generally the same needs and concerns that we all do, and that it's more the system,
Mhm.
be it the two-party system or media, both left and right, that perpetuate the division and have made issues regarding our welfare basically a team sport. And I consider myself a progressive, but I still have my issues with the Democrat establishment. And Jon Stewart was the first person that I saw that didn't care what quote unquote team you were on. He was going to call you on your bullshit. So I knew going into this, it wasn't going to be necessarily about one side or the other, however, more so about the system as a whole. But from what I'm understanding, you did not enjoy
I
this.
I didn't enjoy it as much, mostly because of the didactic nature of it. There was a lot of speechifying in it and a lot of people going, "Well, this is what we have to do," and a lot of grandstanding. There were moments that I really liked, and I liked Steve
Yeah.
Carell's performance.
He's so great.
I liked that they made him unlikable. He was unlikable because he comes into this small town and he has the mentality of the big time hotshot.
Yeah.
I'm better than these people. I'm smarter. And I'm not sure if we're spoiling this. I'm not sure if we're going to get into it, but we can get into it later.
We can go into spoilers now, because there is kind of a twist at the end and all that stuff. So,
Hmm.
right now I'll put this in the descriptions, time codes as to when you can skip forward, but we're going to go into spoilers.
Okay. I like that they tricked him, and
Yeah.
I like that he ended up being the bad guy of the movie, if from a certain point of view.
Well, no, I completely agree, because I think that despite how much of an asshole he is, even in the
Oh, he's
coffee shop, like
such a douchebag.
that coffee shop scene, you're just like, dude, you're a douche. But if anything, I don't think that it really force fed any specific political views when you think about it. It took no stances on political views other than saying
Mhm.
that the entire
Yeah.
system is messed up.
And that might be the problem also, is that it's so milk toast isn't the word, but it really doesn't take a stand on anything. Like, you don't really know the economic situation of the town that they're in. You
No,
just know that you know that it's not going well, but you don't really get the nitty-gritty of going, this is the problem, this was the industry. Like Southern Illinois and Wisconsin,
yeah,
a lot of those are factory towns, and when the factory closes up, especially Southern Illinois, because I know that a little bit better. If a factory or a plant closes down, the town shuts down. That's
yeah.
it. The town is dead. And this town seemed kind of like a farming town, but also not. Chris Cooper's character is a farmer. And so I'm not sure exactly what it was, the industry that he was trying to bring back. Maybe that's
It
just
was the
nitpicking.
base. It was the
It
base.
was a base.
So and that's the thing. I think that was intentional, because he wanted it to sort of
I
fit
I
like the middle of
guess
the country.
it would have been nice to have something specific just for clarity, because I was just wondering that too. I'm going, well, what are they fighting for? Just money. And I guess in the end, it turns out that they did just want money, which was good.
They explain that since the base closed, that basically everyone moved out and their entire economic base has left. I think she says it in the end, where she says that you guys only come every 4 years during an
Mhm.
election, because both sides engage in these proxy wars with one another and use these small towns and these battleground states as chess pieces in their giant game. Because even in the moment where he's sitting there having a beer and burger, which that's a whole funny other thing, but where he's basically like, "Oh, the only way we're gonna beat her," and she says, "Beat her? You mean him, the mayor?" And he says, "Her as in the person she represent," and it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, no, that is the mentality that they're going off of. I think what this could have easily become is Jon Stewart preaching to the choir, at least in my opinion, because he didn't overtly comment on the GOP and Fox and all of that. There were jokes here and there, but almost
It's
as
in
if to
there.
say, if you're here, you know already. And I felt like a lot of people were going in hoping to get their nice dose of confirmation bias. But like you said, I was thinking this was going to be, a DC elite coming to learn something from Middle America and they'll teach each other stuff. But really, it was basically saying that one side is upfront about how terrible they are, and the other side is hidden behind empty words. I liked it a lot. I think it was more than a
Really? You liked it a lot?
yeah, given the context. Again, I don't think this was by any means necessarily a film. No one has a clear character arc. Like Steve Carell never sees the error in his ways. So yeah, I agree. As a film, you're not going to get much out of
I
it.
thought it meandered too much, especially in the beginning. It took a long time to get going. Now, it was short. It was only about an hour and 40 minutes, but
Yeah.
my God, it took like 7 minutes for this thing to get going. I thought it had 2 opening credit scenes. It kind of did.
And that's why I feel like I liked it a lot in the sense that I appreciated what he was saying, not as a film. This isn't so much a film as much as it is an extension of the Daily Show, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I guess. I
And I think the
don't.
reason I liked it so much is that it didn't frame the opposing sides as left and right.
Yeah, maybe I don't care enough about Jon Stewart. I'm not a Jon Stewart fan. I'm not against him. I like him. I like that he played Adam Sandler's best friend in Big Daddy. I enjoy that. He just pops up and you go, "Oh, hey, it's Jon Stewart. What are you doing here, Jon Stewart?" And then you realize it's 2000 and he wasn't Jon Stewart yet.
Yeah.
I liked if it wasn't for the twist at the end that Steve Carell turned out to be the villain, then I would have thought that it was kind of a waste of time because it was so much preaching that everyone's terrible. And I think, I don't know, doesn't everybody know that everyone's terrible? I don't think I responded to it because I think it said exactly what I already
No,
know.
because I don't think that that's what he was necessarily saying. I think we all know our political system is a complete mess. That's obvious. So, sure, if that's what you came out with, then I can see how you felt like it was a waste of time. But I think it was more about how misplaced our criticism is. Because after the election, everyone placed the blame of the results on the middle of the country without considering how much these people are hurting. Between globalization and automation, the economic bedrock of these states were just ripped out from under them. And I feel like that's what this movie was focusing on, just how desolate these places can become when the factories or bases start closing. And Wisconsin itself was part of what they called the Blue Wall. I mean, they voted blue in every presidential election since 1988 until they went red in 2016, and they felt left behind. I think he was saying that we shouldn't blame the middle of the country. If anything, we should be looking to the Democrat establishment and asking, why are you losing touch with these people? And that's what I appreciated about this is that we're so used to throwing dirt at the other side. And with this, Jon Stewart was like, no, 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 no. Both sides are complicit. Let's look at the system as a whole that dumps billions of dollars in elections alone. Elections where that money could be used to help rebuild these towns that are suffering.
The ending does that.
Yeah, and that's what makes the twist in the end so satisfying is that this was all a ruse and the entire town was in on it, and they tricked both parties into dumping the money they would have otherwise spent elsewhere into their own town. And then when Steve Carell gets upset, they're just like, don't be angry that we use the same system you use to take our cut of the pie. So I think what I came out of it with is a side of the argument that is often neglected, and in the current state of the country, I appreciated his empathetic approach.
All the performances in it are really good. Steve Carell is really good in it. Chris Cooper is incredible in it. I thought he was, so great.
He's always great
as the Colonel.
Yeah.
Rose Byrne, when she comes in, and she's such a weird, out of place alien in this world, and she does such a good job, and she embraces it so well in it. She was so good. The moment where she licks his face to get the crumbs off, it was so weird and off-putting.
I literally cackled when he's like, you know how I knew you were here? And she's like, your, blank was tingling. It was so surprisingly well delivered, and I just lost it.
Paul Feig recently gave an interview. Paul Feig is the director of Bridesmaids and many other things, and Rose Byrne was in Bridesmaids, and he was asked who broke the most during the shoot, and he said, well, I love her, but Rose Byrne did all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
I like Rose Byrne a lot.
And she's been in so much, though. She's in X-Men. She's obviously in, Bridesmaids and Spy and all those comedies. Neighbors she was in. And then she was also in Insidious. I mean, she's in so much. Spy is so good. She was in
Insidious?
Yeah, she was the main character. Patrick Wilson, I guess, is the main character. She was the other main character.
I only saw
Insidious.
It once. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Insidious has demons. I know you don't like weird walking on the ceiling demons.
I honestly didn't mind that one as much as the other ones.
Darth Maul demons are not for you. Because he does look like Darth Maul in that. That movie,
He
I
does,
like that
yeah.
movie, Insidious, but the demon does look like Darth Maul, and that's funny. She's been in oh god, Rose Byrne's
She's
been
been
in
in a
so much
lot.
stuff that I like because she was in Get Me to the Greek or Get Him to the Greek too, and I think Get Him to the Greek is one of the most underrated comedies out there.
I just
I
watched that recently.
I love
I
it.
liked it,
Oh,
yeah.
I think it's incredible, and I'm not kidding. I think it's one of the best comedies of the 2010s. It's one of my favorite comedies. I'm
I
not
remember
kidding.
liking it all, but I don't remember much about kind of why I liked it.
I love Russell Brand's character and his relationship with Jonah Hill. Just all of Russell Brand's arc in that as Aldous Snow,
The
I
2 of
really
them have
responded to.
such great chemistry.
And now I'm definitely on the extreme of liking Get Him to the Greek. I think I have a more high opinion of that movie than most people.
I'm actually surprised you had such a big reaction to it, but I think this is a good place to move on to our next and final film, Enola Holmes, the Millie Bobby Brown movie on Netflix.
This was one that we didn't really talk about doing until
Last night.
basically last night.
Yeah,
Did not know anything about this going in other than it's an adaptation of a book that follows Sherlock Holmes's younger sister. Now, Sherlock Holmes
yeah,
traditionally did not have a younger sister, but Sherlock Holmes is a public domain character, so you can do whatever you want with them.
yeah.
Well, in theory, there's a weird lawsuit going on with this. We can talk about that later. But
Is that true?
yes, there is. Uh,
Interesting.
so the lawsuit is that public domain character, Sherlock Holmes, most of the stories are public domain,
Okay.
but the estate of Arthur Conan Doyle still has a couple of the late Sherlock Holmes stories under their control. And so anybody can do a Sherlock Holmes, right?
Yeah.
Just like a Dracula or a Frankenstein or anything like that. You can go out tomorrow and I can dress up in a weird vampire costume and make a Dracula.
Well, and there's like a threshold of how many years before it enters the public domain,
Exactly.
and which Disney's completely changing the laws for.
Yeah, because they want to keep Mickey Mouse out of the public domain.
Yeah.
But the lawsuit basically states that because Sherlock Holmes in this is a more emotional and more basically kind and nice version of the character, that it falls into the later books of Sherlock Holmes where he's an older guy.
Mm,
And because Henry Cavill plays young Sherlock Holmes, he should not be nice. He should be kind of a dick about everything. And therefore, it falls under their ownership, that version of the character. Now, you can go a lot of different ways with it, and I think it's still actually in court, so I don't want to get into all of it because I don't want to get sued.
what did you think of this though?
I was pleasantly surprised by this.
Right?
It was
This
shockingly good.
this is a charming little movie, and I
It's so
really
charming.
appreciated it. Yeah, I went in with very low expectations. I thought it was just gonna be, you know me and remakes and things like that, especially when they're trying to fit in a new character. But despite being directed at a much younger audience, I thought it was surprisingly smart.
It is made for kids, and I didn't know that going in. It feels like a we talked about Utopia being a YA adaptation. This is
Yeah.
a YA adaptation, but it's done in such a fun manner, and it's funny because it feels like a Harry Potter movie.
Oh, someone said that where they're like, "Oh, we need a new Harry Potter. Netflix is on the case."
Well, it's funny though because even the plot structure. Let's go over the plot. If you haven't seen it,
Hmm.
Enola Holmes is Sherlock Holmes's younger sister, and she lives with her mother in this country estate out in England. Very nice, big house. Helena Bonham Carter plays her mother. Her mother goes missing one day, and so Enola needs to find her. She gets on the case to go find her mother, but in the process gets involved with a count. I believe is what his name is. His a viscount or a lord of some kind.
Yeah, he's basically one of the high lords of Britain, and he's also on the run because his
Exactly.
father just passed away.
And so these two kids who are kind of on the run, one who's trying to find her mother, the other who's just running away from home, they get involved in some sort of a mystery.
Yeah, and also someone is trying to kill him.
And so Enola feels responsible and goes to then help him while also searching for her mother. And the reason why I say that it is very much like a Harry Potter is because that is the plot structure of basically every Harry Potter book or the first four. There's a
Yeah.
regular plot where it's Harry just kind of going about his day. And then there's also this sort of secondary plot that he gets caught up in.
Yeah, he's sort of thrust into this mystery.
Exactly. Harry's got to deal with the Triwizard Tournament, but there's also the secondary mystery of who put his name in the Goblet of Fire. We got to figure it out.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's part of why I liked it so much is that it was a nice introduction to the mystery story structure for kids. It didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel because, oh, we've seen this 1,000 times, because for a lot of kids, this may be their first introduction to the language of mystery stories. But more than anything, I appreciated that it didn't talk down to children because the subject matter is pretty serious.
It was a very on the nose. We're going to, again, a very political episode. This is a very political movie as well, surprisingly political, in
Yeah.
a women's rights and a feminist perspective, and they hammer it home very hard that this takes place in Victorian England. The women should be cooking and wearing dresses and corsets, and they go, well, no, you don't need to do that. I'm Enola Holmes and I don't have to do any of your nonsense.
It was on the nose. However, I think considering this was made for kids, they wouldn't necessarily catch on to any implication of the oppressive nature of the Victorian era. So I think it needed to be a little over at times. That being said, though, I even felt a spark of curiosity myself because, sure, I knew England's political structure of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. However, I didn't know exactly when it was established. So I actually started looking it up while I was watching the movie, and even just voting rights for both men and women, and then the rights of people of color, because they had like a black man in the train sitting with a white woman. And I was like, wait, is this revisionist
What
history? And
kind of sci-fi universe is this?
and I was like, this is in the past. That wouldn't happen. Well, apparently there wasn't necessarily segregation. There was racism, of course, but I think we can go into spoilers from here on because I think you have a good basis. Check it out. It's a nice light watch.
The mystery is not that difficult. It's not
Yeah.
based on the mystery. You're not coming into this for the pot boiler of Enola Holmes figuring it all out. It's more about the charm of the performances, the tone of it. The tone of it's very light and it's very fun. And Millie Bobby Brown is so good in this. She's incredible.
She was so good. And some parts were cheesy, but overall, I think she carried the film very well.
Yeah. I was shocked. I was shocked at how funny and how light she was. Maybe because I've only seen her in Stranger Things, where the entire time she's got her blood running down her nose and she's just squinting off into the middle distance looking serious. But she's really funny and she's so charming the whole time.
Yeah, she has great comedic timing, and it was nice to see more of her personality come out in this. Initially, I wasn't a big fan of breaking the fourth wall.
And I was going to say, it's a kid's movie. It's aimed at kids, so I kind of gave it a pass.
Yeah, exactly. And it grew on me as it progressed because she sold it pretty well most times. I mean, this could have easily become kind of a pandering mess of revisionist history, but I feel like it did a great job of balancing sort of real issues and appealing to a younger audience. And they did it with a level of nuance that you don't usually see in television and movies aimed at younger audiences. I mean, her mother was a suffragette that was planning on basically bombing places in England.
So her mother is a terrorist.
Yeah, she's a domestic terrorist, basically. But the stakes were real, right? The kids' lives were actually in danger. And this was surprisingly violent for a kids' movie. But again, I appreciated that they didn't shy away from it. They were like, okay, these are the consequences of violence, and this is the reality of the situation. It didn't talk down to kids. And I really like that.
I also like that Enola did not win at everything she did, especially in that fight in the alleyway. It's flashing back to her fighting with her mother, and Helena Bonham Carter plays her mom and teaching her how to fight. And when she's fighting a grown man in an alleyway, she loses. She does not win that fight, but she does outsmart him in, I guess, blowing up the shed that they're in. So she gets away, but it didn't sit there and go, oh yeah, she's a 16-year-old girl. She could outmuscle a middle-aged man. And I like that.
Yeah, her fight scenes weren't necessarily fight scenes. If anything, she was just countering his attacks because the martial arts that she seemed to be trained in is primarily meant for people who may be outmatched in physical strength to their opponents. So it's more about using your opponent's momentum against them during an attack. So it wasn't delusional in saying, yeah, you can take a grown-ass man.
Vern Gorman drank wine out of G.R. Mormont's skull. You think you're going to beat him in a fight? You are not, sir.
I love Vern Gorman. I think he's so cool. He just plays that character so well.
If you need somebody to menace a child, lead a revolution, maybe make a pregnant woman cry, or maybe, shame a kitten, he's your guy.
Shame a kitten.
You get him on the horn and you go, Burn, we got a part for you. And he's like, all right, who do I have to threaten today?
I also like that the themes were presented with care, that you can be an independent woman. It's okay to have a romantic relationship. It doesn't make you weaker.
Yeah.
Just don't let it define you. Be your own person. I think that level of nuance is important when covering a subject matter such as this. And I like that Sherlock Holmes wasn't necessarily the good guy.
He's never a great guy, ever. He's always portrayed as a cold, stoic asshole.
Sure, he's cold and distant, but initially you're thinking he's the kinder of the two brothers. And I think the point of his character in this, if anything, is a rebuke of neutrality when faced with revolution of thought and ideals. Because throughout the entire movie, you have characters that fall on a spectrum of either status quo loving conservatives like Mycroft and the Count's grandmother to Enola's mother, who is so progressive that she's willing to kill in the name of her cause. But when it comes to Sherlock, I love the moment where she basically says, "You're not interested in politics because the world as it is built to serve you, and your apathy is complicit." But I love that the characters weren't just good or bad. They were always somewhere between Enola's mother and the Count's grandmother.
That's when I knew that she was going to be part of the bad guys, is when she's walking through the forest with Enola and she goes, we have to protect Britain and the history and our people. And I was like, you're going to end up being the bad guy.
Yeah.
And she was.
When she was like, "Make Britain great again."
Essentially, that's what she said.
That was the part that really tipped me off.
I was not prepared for how flippy Henry Cavill's hair was as Sherlock Holmes. His hair is so flippy in this.
Dude,
it's beautiful hair.
He's like the most like muscular, sexy, dashing guy to ever play Sherlock Holmes.
That's true. He's the hottest Sherlock Holmes we've ever had.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Basil Rathbone back in the day was on GQ, but Henry Cavill, Superman as Sherlock Holmes.
As Sherlock Holmes, exactly.
Hey, Iron Man plays Sherlock Holmes. Robert Downey Jr. in the movies with Jude Law. Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal was a little bit more greasy, though. He's very greasy in those movies. I don't know if you've rewatched them.
I haven't rewatched them.
He spends a lot of time being dirty in those movies. It's strange. Also, to bring it full circle, Adil Akhtar plays Lestrade, who was Wilson in Utopia.
Right? Okay, that's what I was thinking. I was like, is that the guy that plays? And I was like, that is so weird that I'm watching this today after watching Utopia. I didn't bother looking it up, but it did occur to me. That's interesting. I like that actor a lot.
I like him too. He's not in a lot of stuff, or at least not a stuff that gets brought over to America.
Well, hopefully he makes his way in, because I think he's phenomenal.
He was also in a movie called Four Lions, which was kind of the breakout back in 2010. And I know that got a lot of play more on the indie circuit than anything else, but he's not in a ton of stuff. This is also written by Jack Thorne. I mean, speaking of the Harry Potter connection, Jack Thorne wrote the play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Yeah. So it makes sense if feels like fan fiction of Sherlock Holmes, because Jack Thorne already wrote fan fiction of Harry Potter, even though it's in the canon. Oh, shots at Cursed Child, even though it's bad.
Did you read it?
Oh, I read it. I read the whole thing. It feels exactly like fan fiction of Harry Potter. And yet J.K. Rowling signed off on it. It's so bizarre.
I thought she actually wrote it.
No, she didn't write it. She just okayed it. Jack Thorne and another writer whose name I don't remember and I feel bad about are the ones who actually wrote it. And apparently, if you go and see the play, it's really good, because the stage production and the magic that you see on the stage is very, very good. The story's terrible, and I stand by that.
But check out Enola Holmes. It's a nice, lighthearted watch. Yeah, I think that concludes this week's watch list. We love to hear from all of you. So if you've watched Amazon's Utopia, Jon Stewart's Irresistible, or Netflix's Enola Holmes, let us know what you thought and if you agreed or disagreed with our take on them. If you like the podcast, please consider liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing with your family and friends. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers on YouTube in order to become YouTube partners, so if you haven't already, it would really help us out if you subscribe to us on YouTube. If there are any movies, television shows, or themes you'd like us to explore, let us know on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find all those links on channel8.5.com. That's channel8.5, completely spelled out.com.
We have new episodes every Thursday. Until next time, my name is Joe Galena.
And I'm Andrew Hanna, and this is Channel 8.5.